Hi guys, my name is Nick Broughton and I'm a Randomfish. If you're Randomfish too, hit that subscribe button and let's be Randomfish together, shall we? Now, when I started doing these little plans for what I was going to do week after week, I have hit a slight snag, and that being that I realised that whenever I'm on camera and I do start to discuss things, I tend to babble. I do. I tend to Hollywood Babylon. A little bit of a plug there for Kevin Smith and the whole, and Ralph Garman and all that lot. It's kind of cool. But I understand that I tend to babble a lot. So I'm going to ask this question, and I want people to answer honestly. I want you to put it in the comments. I want you to do whatever. It has been suggested to me that I should stop these and go on to just do podcasting. If I do films, it will be, if I do anything on the camera, it won't be me that's on camera, it'll be someone else with me directing or just holding the camera and standing behind it. So if you think that might be a good idea, if you would listen to that podcast, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to do this unless someone's actually going to listen. I tend to think of these things like that, and I like doing things for the fun of them, but I also kind of like it when other people listen to what's being said, because that way they can at least have an opinion and we can move the conversation forward. That's kind of what I feel podcasting is. It's continuing a conversation. It's just just a few people outside of the normal restraints of your country or whatever who are talking back to you if it does hit other countries. So please, if you want me to do this as more of a podcast, please let me know in the comments down below. Now that I've got that piece of seriousness out of the way, let's talk Star Wars! Hey, one of my favourite things ever to talk about is Star Wars. Specifically, last time I was doing a Star Wars video, I spoke about Force Unleashed. Force Unleashed 1 and 2, the games within the Expanded Universe, which got me thinking about the Expanded Universe in general. Yesterday, I put up a photo on my Instagram of me reading Knights of the Old Republic, Volume 10 to be specific, based on the Mandalorian Wars. And that, to me, really hit something, because all I did was think about how these characters worked, how everything else like that worked, and rather more fun, like I find, is that I look back on the Expanded Universe, and there's just so much of it that's there, and stuff that's been sort of not shoehorned in, but stuff that's sort of been referred to as if it's common knowledge within the now cartoon series and the other stuff that's happened within the Star Wars canon, within the now Disney canon. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to break it down for you. In canon right now are all of the 8 movies, as well as Star Wars The Clone Wars, the animated series, Star Wars Rebels, this new series that's coming out, Star Wars Resistance. I believe that's part of that. That'll be shown on Disney XD, I do believe. Which should be a fun show. Looks like it's gonna be fun. It's very sort of based in anime, which I think is a very cool idea. And obviously comic books surrounding it since Disney's takeover of Star Wars and since his purchase of Lucasfilm. However, anything outside of that, anything beyond that time frame, is unfortunately now no longer considered main canon of Star Wars. It's now considered what's referred to as Legends. Again, I covered this in my previous video, just thought I'd recover it again now. The thing that intrigues me about Legends in any way, is that this is the subject of a lot of controversy for a lot of people of the new Star Wars films. For example, the biggest one is obviously Luke. Luke Skywalker in the films is, he's incredibly angry and bitter and pissed off, and he doesn't really like the idea of training more Jedi because of what happened with Ben Solo and his descent into becoming Kylo Ren and Snoke and the First Order rising and all that sort of thing. He blames himself entirely for it. He cut himself off from the Force. He vowed never to train another Jedi again. And yet in the Expanded Universe, in the Legends canon, he not only trained a new generation of Jedi, but he fought many more battles. He defeated various adversaries. He even helped train his sister's children, and while one of them in Legends does fall to the dark side, it's not Luke that has to pull him back, it's the other child. And I think that's and that's something that a lot of people don't seem to get, is that the Luke in Legends, he is amazing. He is awesome. He is an incredibly advanced and powerful Jedi. He is what essentially Anakin could have been if he had embraced his Chosen One responsibilities a little bit more instead of just relying flat out on his natural abilities with the Force and with the lightsaber. Luke very much trained. I think Luke, in a lot of ways, is more the Chosen One than Anakin was, because of what sort of happened within the Legends continuity. Obviously, Anakin is the Chosen One as it's discovered throughout the main saga, apart from Force Awakens and Last Jedi. But Darth Vader, to that instance, is and was the Chosen One. He eliminated all of the Jedi. Through time, the other Jedi decided to die as well, and he also eliminated the Sith, leaving only one Force user really left in the galaxy at the end of Return of the Jedi, and that was Luke. He could not have renounced his Jedi abilities, but there was more of a balanced concept within it, because Luke not only was a Jedi, but he used the dark side's abilities in order to enhance his abilities to fight, kind of like Mace Windu does in the prequels. And that's the other thing that's really interesting. In Legends, it's all about the Jedi Order becomes more of what's referred to as a Grey Jedi Order. The Grey Jedi, for those of you who don't know, are the ones who embody both the light and the dark side. They believe that passion can help enhance the concept of wanting peace. They believe that anger and hate are things that are necessary, just not something that should lead a person's actions. They are essentially the people that say darkness and light should work together, but neither should overcome the other. You should work for the concept of having all of them together in a peaceful setup. That's how the Grey Jedi work. And that's how Luke worked throughout most of Legends. He created the Jedi Order, but he based it off the Grey Jedi Code, I think. He based it more on that than he did on the actual Jedi Code. The original Jedi, obviously, as you discover in the prequels, and indeed from what Obi-Wan says and what Yoda says, and indeed what you find in the novels in now Legends continuity, is that the Jedi were all about cutting yourself off from your emotions, dedicating yourself purely to the Force, never once allowing your emotions to control you in any way, shape, or form. The Grey Jedi is saying that shouldn't really be the focus. You shouldn't be denying your emotions. You should be able to utilize them, just not to the extent where they are running your life. You can still use emotion, you just can't let it control you or consume you. The Sith think in the complete opposite to the Jedi, in that they say that passion and emotion are the only way to use the Force effectively. Therefore, they allow the emotions to guide them and control them, and that's sort of where the Jedi-Sith thing sort of comes from. It's the idea that the dark side, if you will, is essentially saying that the only way to effectively use the Force is to allow yourself to be controlled by your emotions. The Jedi are essentially saying cut yourself off from emotion and from attachment and human emotion, and you can have more power with the Force than the dark side could ever dare dream of. The Great Jedi basically is saying, you're both right, shut up, have a piece of cake. And that's what Luke does in Legends. He creates this concept. But in now canon, Luke very much cuts himself off from the Force because he's learned that through the Jedi's, through their hubris, through their arrogance, through their pride, they allowed Palpatine's rise, they allowed the destruction of the Jedi Order originally, they allowed all sorts of things, and his hubris is what caused Ben Solo to become to be as consumed by Kylo Ren and by the dark side as he was. Luke sort of points out that the light and the dark side, that the Force is not something to be used only by the Jedi and the Sith. It's not a tool to be used. It is something that connects everybody together, which is very Grey Jedi, and it is kind of very much in keeping with the Luke of Legend, but it also very much creates, it's also a very opposite view, because while the Luke of Legends took that knowledge and ran with it and said to the other Jedi, you can use, emotion. Emotion is a benefit, it is not something like that. But I find that what I think is happening is in canon, Luke has created this persona in his head where he didn't quite get that while he was training. He's only gotten that due to the fact he's only gained this revelation because of the destruction of the Jedi and because of Kylo Ren's rise and the First Order's rise, and he just cut himself off because he felt that he was unfit to be leading this revolution. The Luke in Legends believes that he is able to lead this revolution and has taught other Jedi to feel this so that they can also help carry on that legacy. And that to me is that slightly bugs me as to why fans get pissy about the Luke we get in canon. The Luke in canon is not perfect, but he's also not he's not that big of an idiot. And he hasn't been for years. And I think it's highly stupid of fans, I'm going to say it, I think it's highly stupid of fans to start judging what has been placed here outside of that concept. What's been given to us is what's been given to us. I find it's incredibly idiotic to try and wish for change when we've already got the changes in front of us. Like, if you really hate the new films, you have got Legends. Legends is right there in front of you. The books are still there. You can still read all about the overly powerful Luke that ruled the Jedi Order. You can still read about all these lovely things. You can still read about the twins that that Leia and Han had. You can talk about Luke Skywalker's wife through the books. It's all ingenious. And those books are still there. The films are this attempt to retell the story in a different light because they didn't want to just carbon copy from the books. Also, there might have been an issue with George Lucas saying, you're not allowed to do that. It's possible. It may not have been possible. I don't know. I have nothing confirmed, but it might be a thing. Legends is amazing, but it's not the tell-all, end-all of the Star Wars universe. But the reason why I bring up the expanded universe and the reason why this whole rant began in the first place, Jesus, that was a tangent and a half. But the reason why I spoke up about the expanded universe in the first place is that everything from before the Phantom Menace that occurred, more specifically, things that happened way before the Trade Federation, way before Obi-Wan Kenobi, way before all of it. I'm talking about things like the Mandalorian War. Mandalore, if you have watched the Clone Wars series, then you'll know a bit about Mandalore, but I'm going to slightly talk about it a bit more. In the Clone Wars animated series, Obi-Wan Kenobi goes to Mandalore, which has recently become a very peaceful planet that is opting to stay out of the Clone Wars. They don't want anything to do with the Clone Wars, they want to stay out of it. Led by Duchess Satine, who is a pacifist. The brilliant thing about Mandalore is that while this episode is happening, you then discover quite quickly that there are other Mandalorians out there who don't share her view. They want to get involved in the Clone Wars and they want to fight. More specifically, they want to fight Jedi. And you discover the existence of a different kind of lightsaber. You're introduced to the dark saber, a very samurai blade lightsaber. It has a samurai hilt, and the blade that comes out is very flat and it's dark. I spoke about this in my Darth Maul history episode. The dark blade was taken from a Jedi temple by a Mandalorian. That Mandalorian has since then passed it down throughout his family. And throughout his family legacy, they've all held the Darksaber. With the exception of near the end of the Clone Wars, which is where Darth Maul, again, previous video, gained it by killing the last known wielder of the blade, Pre-Vizsla. He was an interesting character to sort of watch on screen. He very much wanted the death of Jedi, which is, again, very in keeping with the Mandalorian sensibilities. Mandalorians hate Jedi, flat out. That the war that was between the two peoples kind of very much explains that, and very much explains their hatred for each other. I would recommend looking up everything possible on the Mandalorian War, because frankly, that whole thing was just maddening to me. It was maddening. It was brilliant, but maddening. Maddening. Learn to speak. The funny thing about things like Knights of the Old Republic and all that sort of thing is that they're trying to cover various different stories and various different and all this sort of thing. And the other thing that amuses me is that obviously you have different versions of events that were happening in between the films. To be specific, during the Clone Wars time, after Attack of the Clones, before Revenge of the Sith, before the animated Clone Wars series that is now canon, that we now know and love, there were two DVDs that were released, a Volume 1 and a Volume 2 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, which was a series of short episodes that were developed by animated designers and all this sort of thing to document events that happened during the Clone Wars. And I will be perfectly honest, those Clone War episodes were amazing. They weren't brilliantly animated or anything, but they didn't need to be, because the stakes that were created were done in such a way that you actually felt more or less attached to the idea of the characters. You get an example of Kit Fisto and his underwater fighting abilities. He literally, at one point, you notice that his lightsaber works underwater, which is a cool thing. You knew it was real, but you hadn't seen it on screen. When I saw it, I was quite pleased. I was like, yes, lightsabers work underwater. Yes, that's how it works. But then he uses the Force underwater, and he creates this giant bubble with the Force, and he throws it at a battle droid tank, and it blows a hole right through it and destroys the entire thing. And I sit there and I watch this happen, and I'm sitting there going, what? There actually was something that you didn't expect to see in the Force. It's not something that they've explored, i.e. using the Force underwater. You've never seen that happen except in that animated series. If you have, you've seen it in video games at best. But it wasn't as awesome as that. The idea that Kit Fisto was an underwater style Jedi, he basically made most of his missions based underwater. That was kind of cool. The introduction of Grievous in that version felt so much more ominous than the Grievous we get in the 2008 version. 2008's Clone Wars, it had a good Grievous, but it wasn't a fantastic Grievous. The Grievous we get in the 2003 version was vicious. The introduction of him is a bunch of Jedi all trapped in a spaceship, all trapped in one of their carriers, as a droid armada has decimated their ranks and is attacking full force, all the blasters all firing. It's like none of the droids have been taken out at all. They're freaking out, and all of a sudden a great big metal claw rises, slams itself shut, and the droids all stop. And Grievous's voice comes out saying that he tells the Jedi how hopeless their situation is, and he says that he is still merciful and he will grant them a warrior's death. And the ending of the first volume of that show, after you see Anakin and Asajj Ventress having a little duel themselves, and Asajj being knocked off and whatever, and you see an Anakin very much turning to the dark side moment where he nearly falls prey and becomes the true Vader. His attacking is vicious. But then you get to see this whole bit where Grievous is his introduction. It isn't even that he walks into the ship completely confident and arrogant like you would see the 2008 version do. There's a brilliant moment where they're all sat there and they all back up and they all have no idea about what's happening. They don't know what's happening. And one of them runs out, ready to take anyone on, and all of a sudden, slam! He's killed by Grievous, landing on top of him, armed with 2 lightsabers, and he starts fighting all of these Jedi. There's 4 to 5 of them, I think. 4 to 5 of them in this one setup. Out of all of them, 2 of them die, 2 of them get severely injured, and only 1 of them is left standing to fight Grievous in a one-on-one fight. That made Grievous amazing. He didn't rely on the battle droids to fight for him. When he was fighting, he was insane. He didn't speak a word, he didn't say anything, he flat out just attacked, and he didn't care. He didn't have there was no backstory to this guy, there was no chance of knowing who he was, he just flat out assaulted and destroyed. And that to me is what makes, and that's why Legends to me is still something that needs to be talked about, it's still something that needs to be referenced. While I know that they're referencing Legends now within the animated series of the show, fantastic, great. But you still need to reference where these things came from. And you still need to reference the books and everything else of where they came from. Thrawn in Rebels is a prime example of this. He was a character from Legends that was introduced after the fall of the Empire, and he's brought in into Rebels while the Empire is at the height of its power. After Season 2 happens of Rebels, again, possibly spoilers if you haven't seen the show, you've been warned. You left? Good. In Star Wars Rebels Season 2, we get Darth Vader introduced, we get the return of Darth Maul, and we also get various things happening, including Ahsoka Tano and her possible death at the hands of Vader. As we learn later on in one of the future seasons, it's still very much in the air. However, the prime difference, the prime thing there is that at the end of Rebels 2, Season 2, Vader is not defeated, but wanders away and doesn't get as involved in the conflict as he had done originally. Which again I think is kind of cool. Maul is no longer much of a threat. He buggers off somewhere else in Vader's old ship, or possibly the Inquisitor's old ship. I can't remember which way around it was. But in Season 3, there is no Force warrior that you have to contend with apart from Maul. He is not considered the main threat because he is not a part of the Empire. As he makes perfectly clear in Season 2, he hates the Empire as much as the Rebels do. But he hates it for very different reasons. And his methods of destroying them are very different to the Rebels as well. So he's not much of a threat in terms of that. However, who does become the threat is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Possibly the only Grand Admiral within the Empire, at least according to many others. Even Grand Moff Tarkin has a sense of respect for Thrawn, which is very cool. But you understand why this guy was given this type of ability. He was given this type of rank. He is insane. Even in the episodes that you get of the show, he is a monster with strategy. He is effective, he is ruthless and cunning. And while Vader is not quite the same villain that you get, he is the same villain as Thrawn. He's not without his own threat. Thrawn is a different villain and he's really effective, and it's the same as Legends. And that's what I liked. That's what I kind of like, and that's what I look for more now. I like the idea that they're taking stuff from Legends and putting it into canon, but do it right. Do the same thing with Thrawn as you would do with anything else in Legends. Take his character, take the why he was terrifying or why he was amazing in the Legends, and make it more so than that. And make it like that within canon. I love that. I really do. This has been sort of a mini rant about Legends. So, I want to go into more detail, but if I do that, as you've noticed, I ramble. So, there it is. That's my rant for today about Star Wars Legends. Like I said before, if you want me to continue this only in podcast form, please let me know in the comments. Please send me a message through YouTube. I don't care. Just let me know. Talk to me, people. I need to know these things. I would love to keep doing YouTube videos at the very least. I will at least try and do reviews a bit more, if I can do that. If you want me to continue doing Star Wars stuff only in podcast, great. I'll keep on doing the videos for reviews and whatnot, but the videos will be decreased in number over the course of the week. So, keep on going, my little random fishes. And me, Basic Randomfish out.